안녕하세요. Now you're in lesson 6. Lesson 6 is the most important and the most difficult lesson among all 10 lessons. You're going to learn mostly about modifiers, modifier clauses, and phrases in lesson 6. If you know how to use modifier endings in Korean, you can say you have mastered 50% of the Korean grammar. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. Let's take a look at the things we wanted to tell you in lesson 5. Maybe we missed a lot of things you want to know. You know, we can't cover everything at one time, so if you have any question, do not hesitate to contact us. Meanwhile, we'll give priority to things we think more important as basics and cover them first. Okay, when we learned about negative questions, we saw two very similar predicates. One was 아니다 and the other one was 안다, which is actually pronounced anta, because even though here h consonant, which is in the consonant cluster of the first block, is a silence, it affects the sound of the initial in the next block. It was said that the English equivalent of 아니다 is to be not, and that of anta is to not do or not to be. But it was not enough to explain the difference between these two predicates. 아니다 is used to say something or someone is not something. It has an opposite meaning of 이다, 이에요, 예요, which is used to say something someone is something. anta has a totally different usage. anta is sometimes used to say someone doesn't do something. You don't have to remember this right now though. In our lesson, we also used anta for verb or adjective negation in a form of 지 않아요, remember? So we told you that this 지 않아요 part is also another predicate. Okay, now we know the difference between 아니다 and anta clearly then. One more thing we're gonna learn on this page is a verb, which means to make a phone call. You will realize why we haven't used this verb even though we use it very often in a real life conversation after this. What kind of verbs you use to mean dial someone's phone number to talk to them by phone in English? Make a phone call, or just the verb call, or phone, or even ring in Britain. The Korean verb which means to dial someone's phone number to talk to them by phone is very close to make a phone call in English. Therefore, you can forget about the rest verbs such as call, phone, or ring. Then, what is the Korean verb which means make a phone call? It's 전화하다. 전화하다. It's one of the noun plus 하다 verbs, and 전화 is a noun which means action of dialing someone's phone number and having a conversation through the phone. So 전화 means a phone call. It sometimes means telephone too. As make a phone call has a verb make and an object of phone call, we can also split Korean verb 전화하다 into two parts. 전화 and 하다. And 전화 can be an object and 하다 can be an actual verb. Even you can add the object particle 를 to 전화. 전화를 하다. 전화를 하다. That's why this Korean verb is almost the same as the English phrase make a phone call, even though the direct translation of the verb make is not 하다. It's like do a phone call, right? We learned something like this before. Do you remember? The verb to dance. 춤추다. 춤추다. 춤 is a noun, which means a dance, and 추다 is an actual verb. And you can put the object particle 을 to 춤. 춤을 추다. Many noun plus 하다 verbs can be like this in Korean. Anyway, the point is, this verb 전화하다 cannot have a direct object because it already has a direct object, 전화. So you can't directly translate the sentence like, did you call me last night? Because me here is a direct object. But you can naturally translate the sentence like, did you make a phone call to me last night? So an object of phone call part becomes 전화, and the verb make becomes 하다, 전화하다. And to me is an indirect object, and it can take the particle 에게 or 한테. As we learned about English sentence pattern number 4 in lesson 3 part 2, subject plus verb plus indirect object and direct object. So did you make a phone call to me last night? 어젯밤 저한테 전화를 했어요? If you drop the object particle 를, the predicative part will sound like one word verb 전화하다. 어젯밤 저한테 전화했어요? Okay? And there is another verb which roughly means to dial a phone call. It doesn't make sense in English, but it makes sense in Korean. 전화를 걸다. 전화를 걸다. 걸다 here means to dial, but it cannot be one word verb. 전화 걸다. You can use it in spoken Korean. Nobody will find an error in it, but it's not in a dictionary. So you need to use it in a form of an object 전화 plus a verb dial, 걸다. It looks like a one word, but they are actually two words. An object plus a verb, 전화를 걸다. But as we always say, if it's too much for you, just remember 전화하다 and 전화를 하다. That'll be enough for the rest of your life. Okay, now we are going to start actual lesson 6 from now on. We thought a lot about the content of lesson 6, how far we should go in this lesson, and how much you can take in. So let's see what we are going to learn in this lesson. First, modifier. We're going to learn about modifiers in lesson 6. For those who are not a big fan of English grammar, we will tell you what modifier is. But we'll try not to use difficult English grammar terms in this lesson. We don't like grammar things that much either. A modifier is a word or a group of words that changes, describes, classifies, or restricts the meaning of another word. Then what kind of modifiers that we already know are there? Adjectives. Adjectives modify nouns. As you see the example, delicious food, an adjective delicious modifies a noun food. No further explanation is required. Next, adverb. Adverbs modify adjectives, verbs, and the same adverbs. Let's see the example. Drive slow. Slow here is an adverb which modifies the verb drive. Devastatingly pretty. Devastatingly is an adverb and it modifies the adjective pretty. Next, close. Close is a group of words containing a verb and a subject too in many cases. Let's not use the term adverbial clause or adjectival clause. It's too complicated. Anyway, we will learn how a clause modifies a word. For example, Korean food that I like. We've never learned how to say these kind of things. That I like part describes Korean food part. A person who speaks Korean, or a reason why I study Korean. We'll learn how to say who speaks Korean and why I study Korean part in Korean. We'll learn about these kind of modifiers in this lesson. Maybe it's too easy for you to learn just about modifiers. Let's learn more. Phrase. Phrase is a small group of words which forms a unit but which doesn't make a perfect sentence with a verb and a subject. My hobby is cooking Korean food. Cooking Korean food is fun. Let's learn how to say cooking Korean food part. Next, close. Close is, like we said, a group of words containing a verb and a subject. I don't know what I'm saying. we'll learn how to say this what I'm saying part. This is where I live. When I'm sleepy, I sleep. I know that you ate my pie. We're gonna learn how to say where I live, when I'm sleepy, and that you ate my pie part in Korean. Okay, let's learn all these red colored parts in this lesson. It's gonna be cool. You don't have to know all the English grammatical terms such as relative pronoun, relative adjective, relative adverb, conjunction, or noun clause and stuff. We'll explain each one of them easy. It's actually easier than English. After this lesson, you will feel like you've almost mastered the Korean language. This lesson is that important. Before we start, let's remember that the most basic rule of this lesson. In English, a modifier may come either before or after the modified element. But in Korean, a modifier comes before the word which is modified all the time. Again, modifier comes always right before the element that is modified in Korean, no matter whether it's an adjective, adverb, phrase, or clause. We can finish adjective modifier and adverb modifier with this one page at the same time. Does it mean this part is that easy and simple? Well, it depends on how you think. Adjectives in English don't change their forms according to their usages in a sentence. Pretty is always just pretty even though it's used as a modifier in English. But in Korean, adjectives change their forms as they are used as a modifier. There is no such word adjective conjugation in English, but there is in Korean. Okay, this is how we're gonna explain about this in this lesson. Listen carefully. We'll tell you the basic rule first, which you can apply most of the time, and then tell you the exceptions. Please don't think memorizing all the exceptions is too hard. It's just all about practice. If it's too hard for you, just remember the basic rule and then learn the rest by doing later. Then let's check out the most basic rule of adjective modifier. When you want to turn the basic form of an adjective into a modifier, you need to find the last letter of the stem and see if it has a final consonant or not. If there is no final consonant, you add final n consonant, which sounds like English alphabet N, to the last letter of the stem. If there is a final consonant, you add n sound after the final letter of the stem. It's nothing, right? Let's see the examples. Adjective pretty. The basic form of the adjective pretty is 예쁘다. 예쁘다. In Korean, you can use this adjective as a predicate as you use a verb. You know that. In order to turn it into a modifier, you need to find the stem of an adjective first. What is the stem of this adjective 예쁘다? 예쁘. 예쁘. The first two letters 예쁘 is the stem. After you find the stem, you see what the last letter of the stem has in the final all the time. See if it has a final consonant. The last letter of the stem, 부, doesn't have any final consonant. In this case, you just need to add n consonant to the final of the last letter of the stem. So, 부 becomes 분, 분, 예쁜, 예쁜. Yes, 예쁜 is an adjective as a modifier. It's not that difficult, is it? We told you. The next adjective is small. In Korean, it's 작다, 작다. Find the stem and see if it has a final. The stem is 작, 작. It has a final consonant, 그. When the last letter of the stem has a final consonant, normally you add 은 sound to the stem to make it modifier. 작 plus 은, 작은, 작은. It's actually pronounced 작은, 작은 in spoken Korean, and you know why. So adding final n consonant and adding 은 sound are two major adjective conjugation rules. Remember that. But unfortunately, there are a few exceptions. Without exceptions, no fun, right? Let's check out the first exception rule then. The adjective long. which means a great amount of time or a great distance from one end to the other. The basic form of the adjective long in Korean is 길다, 길다. What is the stem? Yes, 길 is the stem. It's a one letter. What does it have in the final? Does it have a final consonant? Yes, it has, and it is L consonant, which sounds like somewhere between R and L. In this case, you replace L consonant with N consonant, which sounds like English alphabet N, okay? Get rid of L consonant and just add N consonant as a final. So the stem becomes 긴, 긴. That's the modifier form, the adjective long. What is the common part of the first basic rule and the first exception rule? Yes, the final N consonant is added. So it's not that difficult to remember. Let's see the next one. The adjective red. How do you read this one? 빨갛다, 빨갛다. The H consonant in the final of the second letter is a silence, but it still affects the sound of the initial consonant D in the next block. That's why it's pronounced 빨갛다. We talked about this a couple of times before, so you already know that. What is the stem? 빨가, 빨가, including the final H consonant, which is a silence. Therefore, the last letter of the stem, 가, has a final consonant, H, even though it's a silence. In this case, replace H consonant in the last letter of the stem with N consonant again. Yes, N consonant again this time. So it becomes modifier adjective 빨간, 빨간. Because of the fact that the H consonant is a silence, this one looks pretty much the same as the first one. Let's see the next one. The adjective cute. The basic form of the adjective cute is 귀엽다, 귀엽다. What would be the stem? 귀엽. 귀엽 is the stem, and the last letter of the stem, 엽, has the final consonant, B. When the last letter of the stem has a final B consonant, you get rid of this final B consonant from the last letter of the stem and add sound to it. Be careful, it's not sound this time. It's sound. It's sound with vowel. It's actually plus the final consonant n. Remember that. This rule applies when you add yo sound to an adjective which has b consonant as a final in the last letter of the stem. So it's very important. Don't worry, you'll see this kind of adjectives quite often from now on. Let's see the last one together. The adjective delicious. The basic form in Korean is 맛있다. 맛있다. The Korean dictionary will say it should be pronounced 맛있다, but it's too much for you to learn about it. So it is totally okay to pronounce it 맛있다. 맛있다, as we learned. 맛있다. What is the stem? 맛있. 맛있 must be the stem. 있다 part sounds very familiar, by the way. Yes, this is the same 있다 we've been using, which means to exist. 맛 means taste. Taste exists. No wonder why it means delicious, right? When you see this 있다 part in an adjective, you add 는 instead of okay? We add 는 mainly because this 있다 part is not exactly an adjective. It can be a verb too. Adding 는 is a part of verb conjugation rule. We're gonna learn about this soon, don't worry. Anyway, it's 맛있는, 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 맛있는. You can use it as a modifier. Okay, you have learned all 2 basic rules and 4 exceptions of an adjective modifier conjugation. They look slightly different from one another on one hand, but on the other hand, they are all related to the final n consonant after all. And each of them is quite similar to one another, so it must not be very difficult for you to remember them all. We'll help you, don't worry. As we told you, if it's really hard for you to remember them all now, just remember the two basic rules and learn the rest by doing. Then how do we make an adverb? You can turn an adjective into an adverb just as you add ly to an adjective to turn it into an adverb in English. Again, it's the rule turning an adjective into an adverb. Don't be surprised. You just need to add 개 sound to the stem of an adjective. 개 sound. Only one rule. We are very happy to say that. Okay, we have already learned all the grammatical things. Let's use it in an actual sentence then. Let's see the first sentence. Pretty women are kind. It's just an example, please don't get me wrong. Let's reposition the words. Pretty women is a subject and kind is an adjective predicate. Pretty itself is an adjective modifier. It should be positioned right before the noun women, which is modified in Korean too, as it is in English. So, it's just pretty women, kind. It's just a simple sentence. How do you turn pretty into a modifier in Korean? You find the stem first and see if the last letter of the stem has a final consonant. The basic form of an adjective pretty is 예쁘다. This is something we've already seen in the previous page, but let's take a quick look at it together. The stem of the adjective 예쁘다 is 예쁘. There is no final consonant in the last letter 쁘. Therefore, you should add a final n consonant to the last letter of the stem. So it becomes 예쁜. 예쁜. Women is plural. But you can use a singular form when you talk about something as a group. So you can just use the singular form 여자. Yes, you can use plural 여자들 too. 예쁜 여자, pretty woman. 예쁜 여자, a pretty woman. It's easy, right? The adjective kind is a predicate. The basic form of the adjective kind is 친절하다. 친절하다. Therefore, if we add the honorific suffix 요, it becomes 친절해요. 친절해요. 예쁜 여자는 친절해요. 예쁜 여자는 친절해요. Well, hope so. Let's see the next sentence. That girl sleeps prettily. Do you guys, especially native English speakers, use the adverb prettily much? Maybe not. Sometimes native English speakers even just use an adjective in the position of an adverb, right? But in Korean, you cannot do that, not even informally. And Koreans use prettily quite often. Let's reposition the words. That girl comes first because it's a subject. The verb sleeps comes at the end of the sentence. How about prettily? The adverb prettily modifies the verb sleep. Therefore, it should come right before the verb sleep in a Korean sentence. So it's that girl prettily sleeps. The direct translation of the noun girl is 소녀, 소녀. But nobody uses it in spoken Korean. It's too literary. Instead, Koreans use 여자애 more commonly. 여자 means a woman. And 애 means a kid. So 여자애 means a girl. Let's say the speaker is now watching a girl who is not in a touching distance. So we better translate the determiner that into 저 rather than 그. 저 여자애는, 저 여자애는. Let's not talk about the nuance of the particle 는. Anyway, it has the nuance we've been talking about. If you are not sure, just get rid of it. Prettily. The stem of the adjective pretty is 예쁘. You just need to add 개 sound to turn it into an adverb. It's very easy. 예쁘게. 예쁘게. Perfect. Slips. The stem 자 plus 아요. 자 and 아 both have the same 아 vowel. Therefore, you don't have to add 아 sound one more time. It's just 자요, 자요. 저 여자애는 예쁘게 자요. 저 여자애는 예쁘게 자요. That girl sleeps prettily. You okay? Okay. Let's see the next sentence then. That girl is cutely kind. Cutely kind? Do you guys even talk like this in your country? But it totally makes sense in Korean. It could mean this girl is being kind by being cute. Or this girl is cute because she is kind. Or you can get the exact meaning directly from the original sentence cutely kind. Anyway, cutely modifies the adjective kind. Let's reposition the words. That girl is a subject again. Kind is an adjective predicate which will come at the end of the sentence. And cutely comes right before the adjective kind because the adverb cutely modifies the adjective kind. That girl, cutely, kind. That girl, 저 여자애는, cutely. The basic form of the adjective cute is 귀엽다, 귀엽다. The stem is 귀엽, 귀엽. If you want to turn it into an adjective modifier, you should see the last letter of the stem. The last letter of the stem has a final consonant, b. We told you that this is a kind of an irregular conjugation. So you need to get rid of this b consonant first and add u plus n consonant, which forms un. So it becomes 귀여운, 귀여운. But we need an adverb, not adjective. Good for us because it's even simpler. You just need to add 개 sound to the stem. 귀엽, 귀엽게, 귀엽게. You don't even have to get rid of the final b consonant from the stem. 저 여자애는 귀엽게 친절해요. 저 여자애는 귀엽게 친절해요. It's nothing, right? We showed you a little bit weird sentences as examples on this page because we wanted to show you Korean modifiers can be used slightly differently from English, especially adverbs. Yeah, it's fun to use. You can make thousands of them on your own because you just need to add 개 sound to the stem of an adjective. Let's learn more with us later. Okay, let's go on. This is the end of lesson 6 part 1. We are going to talk about the clause modifiers in the next video. 그럼 다음 비디오에서 만나요. 안녕히 계세요.